today with us two incredible artists who are also part of the Inspire research project that I'm carrying out with artists who are based in France, Pablo Gershanik and Luis Carlos Tovar. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be part of this conversation. And I'll say in a little bit more how this conversation emerged. Just to give an introduction to everyone, as you know, the seminars are recorded and they will be available later on our Inspire website, as all the other seminars that we've had so far. So I wanted to introduce you to Luis Carlos Tovar, who is a visual artist working and living between Paris in France and Bogota in Colombia. And for Luis Carlos, as he said in one of the conversations when we were trying to construct the profile on the Inspire website, art is a vessel for reflection, a catalyst for building resilience, and an agent for inner and outer transformation. So in his work, he integrates all these different types of mediums, such as photography, engraving, collage, and video installation. And he especially uses post-photography and archives to explore the creation processes of otherness and how personal memories can shape collective ones. And we'll learn more about it in a second when Luis Carlos will guide us through his work, focusing specifically on a photo book, Jardin de ma Père, My Father's Garden. Luis Carlos will be in conversation with Pablo Gershanik, who is an artist, actor, director, and theater pedagogue from Argentina and now living in France. By animating inanimate objects in live and mediated performance, he interrogates the precarities of history, memory, and the everyday to explore resilience and healing from personal and collective trauma. Pablo and Luis Carlos Tovar took part in our Inspire open space that I organized here in Geneva. That's part of the research project. And we met here in September. And in a sense, this dialogue that you will hear today comes out from them knowing each other from before and being inspired by each other's work, but also some of the lines that they've explored here in Geneva a month ago. And that was a suggestion to actually come and instead of having a seminar focusing only on Luis's work and then on Pablo's work, they've decided to create this dialogue, an exchange on what it is to be a Latino American in Europe and what it means also to have lived this internal exile. So they will reflect on this in today's conversation. We will start with Luis Carlos and then we'll move to Pablo Gershanik. Then they will be talking to each other and I will be maybe interrupting with some questions. And then we'll open up to questions from the audience. Remember that you can type your questions or you can raise your hand and Eva, who is kindly moderating today and taking care of the technical part, will unmute you. I think it would be nice that you can ask questions directly. It's always nice to engage in this conversation directly rather than typing. So also we can see in the discussion part, will also be nice to open up the camera so we can all see each other. I can only see Eva and Liv now, so it's nice to see you both. All right, with no further ado, I hand over to Luis Carlos now, and I look forward to your conversation.
Okay, thank you, Cassia. Thank you, Inspire Seminar, for this invitation. Maybe I would like to start with a little teaser we did for the launch of the photo book called Jardín de mi Padre. The context of this video, it's only 5 minutes, and I like to show it before I start to explain a little bit the work in progress of the creation of this photo book. This was during the COVID, I just finished the creation of this book from 2015 until 2020. And during the COVID, I made this video to make the launch of the book in Lausanne and in different photo festivals. So Eva, can you please run it? Thank you.
El punto de partida de esta reflexión es una fotografía que revela la supervivencia de mi padre durante su secuestro por la guerrilla. La fotografía, una Polaroid que se oculta entre los pequeños mitos de mi historia familiar, es un objeto desconocido para mí. El 20 de febrero de 1980, Jaime Tovar, mi padre, fue despojado de su libertad. Cuenta mi padre que durante los meses de cautiverio, 19 guerrilleros intentaron adoctrinarlo a través de 3 libros: El Capital, de Karl Marx, El Diario del Che en Bolivia, de Ernesto Guevara, y Qué hacer, de Vladimir Lenin. Todos los días a las 4 de la mañana sucedía el despertar diario y milimétrico. Le seguía una marcha en la tupida selva húmeda y tropical del Caquetá hacia el siguiente campamento.
La florenciana es la bebida elaborada con la mejor textura para refrescar los momentos felices. Gaseosa florenciana, la empresa más importante del Caquetá.
Solo una vez tuvo la tentación de fugarse, pero para esos días de abril, mi padre ya estaba enfermo de una flebitis en la pierna derecha. No lo intentó. En cambio, se inventó una manera de recordar a su familia. Cazaba mariposas y recolectaba hojas, flores, semillas de diferentes árboles y plantas que conservaba entre las hojas de los libros revolucionarios. Durante su secuestro, mi padre también recorrió trechos selváticos y presenció paisajes inéditos en su memoria. La región del Caquetá se inicia en el pie del monte andino y termina en los escarpes de Araraquara, adentrándose en la selva amazónica. Erró y contempló una manigua azul y profunda. La describió como una casa donde nunca amanece.
Y aquella mi humilde diosa, yo daría cualquier cosa por esta armadura negra. Recuerdo de aquellas tardes, contemplando el Magdalena.
El dolor ajeno siempre nos llega de manera abstracta y borrosa. Podemos intuirlo de manera esquiva, imaginarlo sí, pero nunca comprenderlo en su totalidad, nunca habitarlo verdaderamente. Esa imposibilidad se ve simbolizada aquí a través de 2 cosas: que mi padre se haya mostrado tan reacio a concebir la fotografía a prueba de vida y el hecho de que mi trabajo sobre ella se iniciara sin haberla nunca visto.
Siento mi sangre huilense, invitándome a que vuelva.
Entonces, para acompañarnos,
Ya sabes, una cola florenciana despierta cuando hay buen apetito.
Correr por el bosque de mata,
Además, cola florenciana
So I want to start saying that the big part of this project was to speculate on memory. This missing photograph or proof of life became not only the starting point, but the main thematic for my research. Post-memory is not connected with events through a mere confirmation of certain facts, but through a creative involvement in them. I like what Joan Foncuberta says about history. His focus on the description of the past. The construction of present means takes precedence in memory. In that sense, memory works with testimonies. In this project, post-memory work with archives. This is, for me, what it means to activate an archive or to adopt an archive. When you talk about family albums or all these clippings you are seeing in the first chapter of the photo book, you see different kind of categories of photography. Ektachrome diapositives affected by the humidity of the Amazony, but also you see different kind of interventions like plans of cyanotype. And I wanted to create this kind of different layers of memory, different layers of what you think you remember. For years, I worked with different communities through collective projects around memory, but I never asked myself about my family history. It was always very silent. We never talk about the kidnapping of my father. He survived. So it was always something that we didn't talk in my family. And it was only until the last years that he was very ill. I started to, more or less the last 10 years. So the first chapter is all the different kind of family album with interventions of cyanotypes. The cyanotype is a technique that it was used for the herbariums in 19th century by Anna Atkins, and I recovered this technique to use it as a kind of inventarium of the herbarium my father did during the kidnap. Also, you find some the ransom letters and the extortion letters, some negatives. And different kind of interventions, but everything like with what we call post-photography. So the main obstruction in this book was not to photograph anybody, just to activate the archive. And I thought this was an exercise on memory. For instance, this picture that you see is about what is absent, no? The first house that I inhabit, there is no picture, no? So there is this silence. You can also find some empty scenes or empty memories. And this obstruction of not making a photograph of my father that could be very easy is one of the biggest questions that we have as a visual artist when you work with another Spain. How to represent one other Spain? Does only personal memory exist? Or is history critical and collective memory ideological? Or is collective memory a fantasy? And that's why I prefer always to talk about this idea of post-memory, give us a chance to speculate. And we think that because we reconstruct, we are telling the truth. But I think there is a lot of fiction in reality and reality in fiction. And my book is about these layers of what could happen at that moment in 1980, but also with an unresolved war that it's in Colombia, and how important is for us as artists, as an individual, but also as a Colombian, to be able to talk about our own personal memory as a entity of our own personal memory, to share it without any obstruction or institution. And yes, maybe I just open now for questions if there is.
Luis Carlos, would you like? Yeah. Do you want a question from the audience, a reaction from the audience?
Yes.
So if anybody, let me turn on my camera. I like this way of working with Luis Carlos and Pablo, because I never know what is going to happen. So it's like a space of imagination and always room for experimentation. So if there is an immediate question from the audience, maybe a specific question that you want to ask to Luis Carlos, is there anyone? You can raise your hand and then Eva can unmute you. Otherwise, of course, I have questions prepared, but I think Cindy, right? You're raising your hand. Maybe Eva can unmute you.
Thanks. Thanks, this was really interesting. One thing specifically I was curious about, so you were talking about the fact that you had already engaged with these memories of others, but you hadn't looked at the personal. And I was wondering, because I recently had a discussion about someone from Germany saying something similar, that there was kind of a collective discussion, but not a personal one. So I was wondering whether that is the same in Colombia, or whether you just as an individual had been very interested in other people's stories, but there's still also no collective discussion of this. Yeah, I think I can see you nod, so I think.
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, yes, when I think when you are in your own country with an open conflict war, it's very difficult with this cacophony and noise, that it's impossible to hear yourself, but also to see this post-memory. Since I came to Europe, that it was 7 years ago, I never felt so much near to my family history, and it was only by this distance and by this like dreaming, daydreaming situation, to be up far from your family and country, that you start to think about your past. It's something, I don't know, it's strange. And I worked with displacement and refugees in Colombia and in Europe, working more an idea of a contra-atlas. I was all my different projects was about recovering the escape routes and the escape plans of many of refugees and people in Colombia. But I never asked myself about that's because my family history, because it was always very silent. Also, I felt privileged because my father survived, and in my family history, we never talk about this. And I was raised not in Caquetá, but in Bogota. So we never talk about that. But it's true that when you work with in a collective way, then you start to affect I imagine it's something unconscious that you start to ask yourself the same questions you're asking to the other. So I think Jardín de mi Padre came like that. No, I tried since 2010 to make this book, but my father was totally close to the idea that he didn't want to talk about it. So I just recover many of all these archives until his almost death through the National Library. And for instance, all of these images you are seeing is the telegrams the friends and family sent to my mother and to my grandmother when he was kidnapped. And the books before is the books of the revolutionary indoctrination that he brought from the jungle, and inside he put all these seeds and natural elements he hunted during the kidnapped. Yes, I was raised with the butterflies in the back of my bed, but I never knew it was all these broken leaves and broken butterflies. They were collected by my father during the captivity. So it was always something present, but silent. Thank you, Cindy.
Luis Carlos, do you want to continue or you want to have more questions?
No, I think it's Pablo's turn.
Yes. All right. So I see that Stefania has a question. Stefania, do you want to keep your question to the discussion between the two artists that will happen in about 20 minutes? Or you prefer to ask, maybe Eva, you can unmute Stefania. You would prefer to ask the question immediately. If it's a specific question to Luis Carlos, you can ask now. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Eva? Is it? We cannot hear Eva.
You are muted, Eva.
Eva, you're muted.
We don't hear.
Hi. Oh, sorry. I was going to say that I can wait. No problem.
All right. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So we'll give you the word then in the conversation in a little bit. So let's move on now to Pablo.
Hello, Kasia. Thank you very much for the invitation, Eva, for organizing all these, and of course to Prio and to the Inspire project. I was looking at the little windows that we have here, and I was thinking that if we are coming from all these different places, it's because we have moved sooner or later. And I was thinking also about the title of this dialogue, about moving memories. So I was thinking about this idea of moving, this idea of is memory something that is moving because memory is moving, or because we are moving? What is moving when we remember? And I was thinking about, all this title and about the fact that in my case, I come from a family where Exodus has been for many generations part of the everyday's meal, moving and moving and moving. And I think that there's something about moving here as a pertinent question. What do we take when we move? What does it mean to move? And so if we are moving, how do we reconstruct what we need to reconstruct when we need to reconstruct in the new place? And also something that has to deal with what I think part of my work and I think part of the shared experience that we have with Luis and now with Kasia is the fact of being in a moment and being in a place where we've lived many things, and we are also looking forward to other things. So we are in the middle of preserving, keeping and always also wanting to move with that and to construct something with that. That's for me the idea of longing. That's for me the idea of being in a present time, bringing stuff from what happened and also projecting into what will be capable of happening. Just to start with some reflections, and I want to share with you also a little film that talks about a very recent experience that I started in 2019 in France called the Intimate Model Slab. That is a process that started a little bit earlier in Argentina. You will see in a museum called the Museum of Memory, that is the most important concentration camp of the Americas during the Argentinian dictatorship in the 70s and early 80s. And from that personal experience, I could understand that this personal experience at the beginning was leaving the space for a collective experience. So what I wanted to share with you is something that has to do with that. And it's the result of an experience that I co-created with a structure in France called l'Association Française des Victimes du Terrorisme, the French Association of Victims of Terrorism Victims, that is gathering people who lived the different terrorist attacks in France in 2015 and 16. So Eva, if you want to present that, and then I'll allow myself to keep reflecting a little bit. Thank you very much.
Aucune histoire n'est personnelle. Toute histoire est sociale. Toute histoire est culturelle. Toute histoire est collective. Parce que c'est là que la rencontre entre la petite histoire, l'histoire personnelle et l'histoire collective s'est faite. Et c'est ce qu'on va faire pendant cette semaine. Un laboratoire autour de qu'est-ce que ça veut dire de reconstruire un événement tragique, un événement traumatique, un événement emblématique et le détourner. Et trouver certaines ressources théâtrales, des mémoires, des liens sociaux, pour, dans un petit dispositif, explorer, s'exprimer et laisser venir quelque chose. Ça va? Ça, je monologue. Là, j'écoute pas. Là, je travaille pour moi. Mais là, je travaille à l'écoute. Donc, je me permets de proposer quelque chose et de voir s'il me suit. Pour cette idée de représentation, les objets seront nos grands complices dans cette idée de la métaphore, dans cette idée de détournement, que parfois même pas le corps de l'interprète peut faire. Eh ben voilà, et toi tu le suis, mais parce que c'est lui qui est en train de bouger. C'est pas toi. Fais-lui bouger, voilà. Ah, voilà. Donne-toi le temps pour respirer avec elle. Voilà. Et on connaît très bien ces personnages. On l'a tous vécu, ce personnage-là.
Maman, raconte-moi comment c'était mon père. Comment c'était la guerre en Espagne et en Algérie?
Enfin. Pose une question et donne du temps. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire, il est où, papa? Dis-moi, il est où, papa? Maman. Maman. Je te parle, maman. Donne un bébé, pas un pull. Donne un bébé. Voilà. Ah, voilà. Ces gestes, voilà. Ces simples gestes fait un bébé. Ça fait un pull. Ça fait un bébé. Ah.
Qu'est-ce que c'est de reconstruire une tragédie? Qu'est-ce que ça implique pour une personne, pour une famille, pour une société de réagir à un événement traumatique? Reconstruire implique documenter ou raconter et c'est raconter l'histoire d'une nouvelle façon. Mon père, Mario, médecin pédiatre, militant politique et joueur de rugby, a été assassiné dans cette ville, la ville de La Plata. 40 ans après, je me suis donné à la tâche de reconstruire dans une maquette les jours de notre tragédie et les histoires personnelles et collectives autour. Je me suis interrogé sur si une maquette pouvait aider d'autres à élaborer leur histoire de la même façon que m'avait aidé moi. C'est là que j'ai créé avec une équipe de collaborateurs maquettes intimes. On invite au laboratoire à des gens qui ont vécu une expérience traumatique à maquettiser de façon résiliente leur histoire. Avec des outils de l'art et de la psychologie, les participants trouvent une nouvelle façon d'approcher des expériences personnelles et collectives.
Donc il est 19h38 quand nos regards se trouvent pour la première fois. J'ai jamais vu autant d'intensité, un bleu profond. J'ai jamais vu autant de beauté. J'ai entendu les docteurs qui sont sortis s'exclamer les tout carrés. Je leur ai répondu c'est un bébé Picasso. Et moi j'aimerais bien construire une sorte d'énorme sein rose, très très pop.
Moi j'étais au Bataclan. J'étais avec des amis.
Un village qui est dans les Pyrénées orientales, dans la montagne.
Et puis ils nous disent est-ce que c'est Charlie, est-ce que c'est Charlie, puis ils s'énervent.
L'histoire est désespérée et la fin est extrêmement triste.
Je vais parler du retour au Congo.
La seule chose que je me souviens le plus, c'est les yeux de Chérif Kouachi. On voyait que les yeux.
Qu'est-ce qu'on voyait?
Les yeux.
Qu'est-ce qu'on voyait?
Les yeux.
C'était quoi?
D'un gamin, quand j'ai discuté avec lui.
Un gamin?
C'est un gamin manipulé, même pas méchant.
De me dire que j'ai réussi à sortir de là-dedans, c'est un miracle. Et du coup, c'est pour ça que j'ai voulu le faire ouvert, parce que c'est la bonne étoile qui m'a protégée.
Offre-toi cette possibilité de faire d'une image devant laquelle tu as envie de partir en courant, une image avec laquelle au moins, tu es capable de te ficher la paix, au moins. Parce qu'elle, elle va être toujours avec toi.
Je suis toujours sous la table, je suis toujours sous la table.
Tu vois? Donc comment tu sors de sous la table et tu vas sur la table? Et ça, c'est d'aller sur la table.
Je n'entendais que le mot Charlie de la bouche masquée de ces hommes. Charlie, Charlie, Charlie. Je ne voyais que des yeux paniqués, sur une peau livide, entourée de noir. Vous êtes trompé de société. Je ne suis pas Charlie.
Paris has this strong power to make you fall in love over and over again. The place that makes you want to dance under the stars.
Je m'appelle Antonin. Je vais vous raconter l'histoire de mon clan. J'ai perdu ma maman à l'âge de 11 ans.
Les docteurs me prennent peut-être pour une folle qui délire, mais moi je veux t'accueillir, te rassurer, te souhaiter la bienvenue dans ce monde.
Triste seul au soleil couchant.
Thank you very much. And well, with this, I would like to go further into our conversation with two topics that for me are interesting and that always when I listen to Luis talking about that, it sounds with my work. The first thing is how do we deal with what is lacking, with what is not there, and that for me is the function of the art, to deal with mystery, to deal with what is not there, to deal with silence, to deal with what we don't show. And the second thing is this idea that Luis has referred to activate. There is something that we have. Can we call it like an archive? Can we call it an imprinting? Can we call it a memory? And for me, that is the question. What does it mean to activate? In my field of expression, I talk about animation, to animate something that in Spanish or in French has to do with insufflating a soul to something. I work with puppets or I work with objects. So the idea of bringing alive something that is there but that seems not to be alive is something that guides my work. And I could start also with a question in a way, Luis, which is, I think that what is complementary and at the same time contrasting in our works is that you work bidimensionally in the dimension of memory as an imprinting of memory, yeah, as a visual archive, but this idea of imprinting we keep something that is printed in our bodies. Can we call it a book? Can we call it a person? Can we call it a personal or a familiar or collective experience? And I think that's very complementary, this idea of memory as an imprinting, with what I try to explain, which is memory as an action. Memory as an action of reconstructing, of transforming, of creating a metaphor. You see, and that for me is something that could be perhaps interesting to start thinking about, this idea of bidimension, 3-dimension, what is there, what is not there. And finally, this image that I think we talk a lot about, this idea of what we call in Spanish a caracol, a snail, that is a being that holds the house in the back. What does it mean to keep moving with something that belongs to our perhaps symbolic patrimony, symbolic territory, that has nothing to do with geography, but to reconstruct something that is our little fireplace wherever we are. So that would be for me a point of departure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pablo, for all these beautiful explanations. I think the snail as a metaphor of the individual that carries their own memories, for me, is the same like the atlas that carries the world and their maps and their cartography or interior cartography in their back. For me, it's always plain. For you, it's 3-dimensional. And we met like that during the process. I was making the photo book at Cité Internationale des Arts in Paris. I had the chance to work with Pablo. I got inside the workshop he was doing with different victims and guests, and I went inside to explore different possibilities of my work. That it's, as you said, is bidimensional. The architecture of the photo book, something that is related to the 3D, is when you pass the page. So when you pass the page is what we said here, the mise en page. And the mise en page is that you construct this idea of memory, but with accumulation of bidimensional layers. No, it's an accumulation, flat accumulation, and you will tell the audience what happened during that workshop, that I couldn't do my mock-up or explain anything, but it gave me many tools and different possibilities to finish my photo book. But it's true, this idea of the mock-up as an architecture, and the photo book, I see it as a brick. And the brick as this idea of Louise Bourgeois, that it's beautiful. She said that if we talk about a cathedral, each brick, it's a memory. And the construction of different bricks or memories, it's really the collective memory, this diversity of voices and diversity of truth also.
And I think, Luis, that when you say the 3-dimension comes by passing the page, I think that for me is the key, which means you can pass the page, and we can use that as a metaphor once again, when another one takes action, when an audience, when someone in front of you can go, or yourself, but in a different position, can turn the page, which is for me something that talks about intimacy, which is something that for me is very, very important, and I think that's something we share. I normally think this idea of intimacy not necessarily as opposed to to what is private. You see, because I think that when you talk about private, it's something that just belongs to you and it's just for yourself, rather than when you talk about intimacy, it's something that belongs to you, but that you can share with another one. And by sharing that intimacy with another one, making it common, you create a new intimacy, a common intimacy. And for me, that common intimacy that you have with another one, an audience, a spectator, a reader, someone in the audience when you do a theater, that melting pot, that third body that is not neither your experience nor the other one's experience, but something in between, is what explains somehow or what deals with what we do, and what in my personal case helps in my position actually to pass the page related to our story, thinking about dealing with trauma or dealing with a complicated or a complex story. How do we turn the page? We cannot bury the book, we cannot live without the book, but can we turn the page and rewrite some other passages of this book?
See, I see my photo book. It's like an open script, and that open script is not something finished. It's just like a manual of instructions to build a story unfinished. And in that way, it's not. I am not animating the photo book. Is the other one is that can read and construct their own story. I don't know. And but that's what I think archives are so important, and all this idea of creating with the thing it's absent. What you said, everything that it's not in your hand, you have to. I don't like the word reconstruct. It's more to speculate for me. It's like you always create this. It's fiction. Your mind is so strong that you just cross your reality to build a narration, and that creative process helps you to pass the page.
Yeah.
But you can tell the story how we met.
We met. We met, as you said, in 2019 in Paris, because I went from Buenos Aires to France with this first model that I created in this museum, and then by being in France, presenting in the Saint-Quatre this model, and starting to listen to the audience, saying, okay, this question about how can we through arts try to give pertinent questions to what is today the invisible wound that we as societies are living, helped me to understand and to go to the question that was, can creating models help others? The way I dealt with my absence, my father's absence, which was creating like a playground, creating like a space where humor, we're a safe space, we're a group together, and we're moving with the body and animating once again. Inanimated objects, photographs or pictures or journals or postcards or letters, whatever, can be realized. And through that, I decided that I wanted to take some time in France to open that space to people having lived or coming from terrorist attacks, from wars, from exodus, from different displacements. And so that's why I created in this moment this lab, where you were also as a resident in the Cité. So I think that's why we first opened that space. But what is interesting for me is that you helped in a way not just to construct your story, but your particular and sensitive gaze helped others by portraying by portraying some other stories and helping them to construct fictions based on their stories, we could help others to deal with what was lacking in their stories. If you see in the documentary, there is a moment where you are taking a photo of the girl who lived Bataclan, or from the artist who fled Congo. And by bringing these images that they didn't have in their story, but they needed to have their model done, is once again, is turning the page, is the reader who comes and turns the page in order to make the book alive. That's what I think.
Cassia, do you have
Yeah.
some questions?
I have
Or-
questions, but I'm sure the audience has also
or the
questions. So I want to give this opportunity to others. You know me, I always have questions, but I want to give a chance. I know that Stefania wanted to ask a question, so maybe you want to come in now, and others. And if there is no immediate question coming in, then I can always ask. Stefania, would you like to come back with your question now?
Hi, hello. Yes, nice to meet you. I turned on my camera. My name is Stefania. I'd like to briefly present myself. I'm a student. I'm actually currently working. I'm a graduate student. I'm currently working on my thesis, which touches upon memories and anti-colonial archives. And part of this thesis is a reconstruction of the story of my grandmother, who was Salvadorian and then Civil War, went to Mexico. So I really, I found Luis, Luis Carlos, your work very interesting, and I wanted to ask you how have you approached not making the story of your father focused on war or focused on conflict and more about him? Or was that ever something that you thought about? Or how do you approach this? And also, since we're talking about collective memories, I wanted to ask how you actually approached it within your clan. Since I'm doing the reconstruction, I also don't like the word reconstruction. I don't know if it's for the same reasons as you, but I prefer cultivating. The cultivation of the story of my grandmother, I involved most of my family in it because of this approach of memory as collective and as an active process. So I wanted to ask, how did you, if that was ever something that you thought about or incorporated, or is this something that goes completely outside of the scope of your work?
Thank you. Yeah, and you're very brave. We need everyone. We are institutions of memory. Everyone should make their own narration. You know, the personal memory really can build collective memory. And in that sense, in Colombia, people are just afraid. Everybody's afraid to tell their story, or maybe they think that it's not so important. And they just give that responsibility to the Museum of Memory or to the government that it's passing by. So yes, I didn't focus on the war. I focused on the speculation of what happened to my father, but it was never planned. You know, my starting point was the photograph of the proof of life. But this is a memory when I was a child, because my sister saw that photo, and my father took that photo after that and hid it for the rest of our lives. So, but my sister told me about that picture, and I imagined that since I was 11 years old. So part of the construction of my book, or photo book, it was just as I didn't have the picture, so I just speculate on everything else. I think the album of familia, it's a very important element. It's a taxonomy of your family. You can really try to make the family albums are very important, because you can see the change of the, not only the ages, but it's about representation. Representation of the family, the places, everything is a scene, no? And then the script, I think the script is your own family in the post memory of that. I think because sometimes when it's so clear, in my case, I went to the National Library and I found 3 different newspapers, and the 3, they contradict themselves with the story of, no, it was the M19, no, it was the FARC, no, it was the ELN, and after the ransom letters, it was the EPL. So it was, you know, there was no, as Ritipan said, truth is not enough. So you have to play also with this idea of truth, because at the end is not the important thing, is the new building of your own truth in your narration. So and yes, so it's your story anyway, so you can do as you like. I don't know if it was that the question.
Yeah. I guess it also touches upon why reconstruction. I don't know. I've always struggled with the term reconstruction, because it entails that there's a truth that to be reconstructed when it's not really about that. But yeah, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
I think maybe that's one of the questions that I had to both of you, because to what extent this is really reconstruction, Pablo, what you're doing. I remember when you were explaining to us how you do the models, the intimate models, the maquette. Is that really reconstruction, or is this what Luis Carlos is referring to? Is this kind of multi-layered memories that are crossing and crisscrossing, because you're working with several people on the same story? Maybe you can give us a little bit of insight into that also. And in a sense, what emerges is not exactly the maquette of the event as it happened, but as it was imagined by different people and experienced in these particular moments, not only in these particular moments, but also as people remember and maybe want to remember, or what comes to their consciousness. So there is a lot of, I would go for the word of what you said, Luis Carlos, you have to play with truth, right? So you kind of, there is that, not playful in a sense of this is a joke and we're having fun, although we are also having fun while we are building these models, but allowing yourself a space for different types of interpretations that come from not only knowing, but different experiences, sensory experiences.
That's for me, thank you, Kasia. What happens by this idea of a model? A model has many different layers, obviously, as reality or truth does. And what I think is important is this idea of 360 degrees possibility of watching an object. So all these different perspectives that you can have refer to that object. And the second one is this idea of model as an architectural image, which means for me is a piece of life that could be that way. It's not something that happened that way, but it's a possibility. It's what an architect creates, a space of life, a life space, like imagined in a way. But what is also for me very, very important is the question where I always start, as Luis says, this kind of instructions manual that I give to the people when they start creating the models is, at the same time that your life was changing forever, what was going on in the same neighborhood, in the same street, in the same city, in the same country, in another country, in terms of everyday's life and in terms of epic objects and epic situations, and to be able to gather all these different images, which goes for me to this idea of reconstruction that for me is referred to, if reconstructing means to get back to the moment, to the ground zero of the experience, and as an art, in a way, as an archaeologist, to dissect and to divide each and every ingredient that composes this scene. Or on the other hand, reconstructing means to reconstruct ourselves, which means to tell the story in a different way, to tell ourselves the story in a different way. And by creating this layer of fiction, obviously opening the space to a playful way, which for me is something to do, yeah, with playing in terms of creating a dynamic and creative process, and also to be able to, that is something that for me is very important when we deal with people who lived a very traumatic experience, which is the role of the victim, which is being able to step aside from that such an identitarian role that ourselves and societies propose to people having lived all these, which is like a stamp. It becomes once again like, this is my identity, this is what I am, and so we cannot move from there. So for me to get once again into this kind of playground means you can turn on the page, you can switch, and as Luis was saying, that has not necessarily to deal with reality, but for me with truth in a theatrical way. It's verosimile. It's something that we accept as a convention, that we imagine together, and that for me is the point. It's not if Hamlet is really dying there, but we accept this code in order to be able to let the story develop. You see. So that for me is the idea of truth, and not the idea of reality. Reality is another thing that is, it's abroad, and I don't deal with reality. Reality deals with different rules. I deal with what we can do with what has happened, which is reconstructing in that way.
So I want to check with the audience. Do you, anybody who wants to ask a question, you can place it in the chat or raise your hand, and Eva will unmute you. So please, there are some reactions. I know that there is, I don't know if Roberta can speak, but I'm sure she would be able to share a lot because she's been very active in both of your scenarios in Colombia and in Argentina. But I'm not sure, Roberta, if you are able to connect.
Yes, I am, but I cannot connect with the camera because it doesn't work here in Microsoft Teams. So what can I do? In the north, it doesn't do for anybody. Well, I think it's very close to me, especially in connection to the spaces of memory. Thinking of my exhibition at the Parque de la Memoria in Buenos Aires, where really we could absolutely occupy this full space and work with young people who seem to live in the present, the memories they were searching. By walking through those spaces, so the activation in the present of memories of others triggers in the young people lots of dimensions and possibilities, and understanding of the story of their parents and other generations. So when you speak about your experiences in Europe and how it has marked your relationship with your own country. I live in Northern Ireland in a very remote place with snow, not even near a town. After being in big cities in Santiago and London, I find that memory lives more in me. I agree with your position. But on the other hand, it's less painful because it takes your own complete body and environment, and I find that fear is less there. You can confront yourself, and you can confront yourself in the scenario you are there. You don't know all the risks in the new place. You live and you only interpret the risks you had. I lived the dictatorship in Chile, and I knew exactly what kinds of sounds, the cars, the motorbikes, the uniforms, the colors. Here it's all very different, and probably they are not more benign, but they don't trigger in the skin the same kind of presence. You can live it as a story, as an experience, but you don't enact it in the same way. That is my connection to what you were talking also about Colombia, having worked there since 1999, going different times with the peace brigades. Imagine risking your body as unarmed accompaniment to people. You really were prepared to do it, but the experience of the past helped you to be and confront it. And also there were less barriers of language. When you are in another country like you are now, with a second language, you are also struggling with language because words have different meanings in every language. So I can be in sympathy with many of the things you say, and certainly it seems part of my own way of living life and the experiences of the dictatorship.
Thank you, Roberta. We couldn't.
Thank you.
The connection was quite poor. I hope you. We heard most of it. I think maybe it was better for Pablo and Luis Carlos. Do you want to respond to some of these ideas of what Roberta was sharing? Also, the idea of a safe place because you, from a distance, in a sense, Luis Carlos, what you were saying, that you started being able to now or really engage with your personal story that, in a sense, underpins your artistic practice, and the same for Pablo, from a distance, so being outside of Colombia, but also because it is, in a sense, a safe space, right? France, in that sense, it's a distant place, so you can take a different perspective on these experiences. And Pablo's the same. Yeah, maybe that's something that resonates with both of you.
Well, in my case, yes and no, because I was making the book really in between the two countries at that moment. I was first in Madrid, then in Colombia back, then came back to Paris. So I was in between. And I think part of that situation, when you are in between, you are in this non-space that allowed you to see and compare something very interior or underground. You don't. I didn't expect it to do photo books. No, I'm a visual artist. I do exhibitions and yes, I did my practice in different workshops, but I never thought making a photo book was so important as an architecture to explore this idea of post-memory, but also it gave me time to edit my own memories and myself. And I think when you are in between, this is a situation that it was not planned. No, it was not planned, and that I was not on exile. So it's a different situation. I was like in between two spaces, and this in-betweenness gives you the privilege to hear yourself and your childhood. I was interested into trying to recover what happened in my family, in my childhood, that I was silent. It doesn't mean it was not violent, but it was silent, as many personal stories in Colombia. We are the second country after Syria with the interior displacement. So it's huge. It's huge. So it's, so I think this idea of in-betweenness is important to say.
Yeah.
Pablo.
Thank you, and thank you, Roberta. I listened to your story in a very close way, because it's our story as well. I wonder a lot about creating safe spaces in order to do with what we have experienced, and I have three clues that for me are somehow what I think lead my work. The first one is time. You cannot deal with something without some time. Every time that I propose to create models to people that are not yet with some time in between, that are still in the wound, for instance, today with mothers in Mexico, the experience it's almost unlivable. It's not possible. You need some distance. You need a scar rather than a wound to be able to deal with some stuff. Otherwise, arts have nothing to do in this static approach to the thing. The second one is a group. For me, that's a basic clue, which is creating in a common space, which means that you are going to be creating your model, but at the same time, you are going to have 10, 12 people. It's what we are doing today here, making a common space of word. And by bringing this word to a common space, an action to a common and shared space, there's something that has to do with empathy and to understanding what we do as a social tie, as a way of creating network linking. And the third one is transposition. We cannot face the horror directly into the eyes. We know that. So what are the ways we can have in order to create metaphor, which means to create, once again, a veil, something in between the experience and ourselves, in order to not just to be able to express that, but in order to give to the audience a space to relate with that, to open the space, to create emptiness, to create this space in between, as Luis was saying. And the other one for me is humor. Because humor is something that we all identify with. By deconstructing this kind of fixed and rigid way the statues of our stories have, the monuments of our stories, because we all have these monuments inside ourselves that we can not touch, that we need to pay respect to, etc. And by deconstructing a little bit this image, for me, is a way of bringing once again identification with an audience. We identify with this comic character, with this situation. Sometimes things are so painful and so important that we cannot deal with them in an important way. That we need to create this distance, which doesn't mean to be shallow, but means to bring lightness to what happened.
Cindy, you wanted to ask a question of himself?
Yeah, I actually. Is it Roberta who wants to say something?
I could say something in connection to humor that you made. There is another way in which I have approached the topic, and it's by sewing with textiles. Because the textiles is something you need every day to touch yourself, to dress yourself. you encounter the other. And in this way, with the textile artists in Buenos Aires, we have used the clothes of people, but not the little pieces, the scraps that is very symbolic. We have used the full clothing so that we can see the person. In this moment, I have one of those pieces at the Arts and Human Rights Festival in Dublin that starts tomorrow. And it's the full body of a woman who knitted it herself. And it's there in front of you. There is no humor, but there is the approachability because the person is there. You can imagine the person not only mentally, there is even a shape. You can imagine the size, the colors the person wore. You can do a lot of things. So, as a different way that is a bit, I don't know if it's less painful, but it's very tangible. And the tangibility and the fact also that you can sometimes not deal with the very terrible things by looking into the eyes of the other. When you are sewing, you look at the cloth. You put the needle in and out, a regular thing that helps you, like with the heart, in a regular beating. So it also helps you to be sitting and sewing. When you are in a group, and I pick up your concept of the group, it's extremely important. And in a sewing group, you don't need question answers. The words come one, or you answer, or you don't, and you comment. So you go from very deep reflection to very quotidian. There
And
is
in a direct way, by creating something together, you can find pertinent questions. It's not binary. It's not action, reaction, question, answer. But the importance of creating this third space. That's why we, since the beginning of times, we fish together, we hunt together, we wash together, we go to the mountain together. We need to create this space in between to pose the necessary questions.
Right. Yes, the Zoom doesn't, it's not the best place to do these creating together, but we're somehow managing. So I think now it's Cindy, as I see. Yes.
Thanks.
Cindy.
Yeah. Even before you started talking about safe space, Pablo, I was thinking about something and I was wondering whether that's off or not, but this idea of safe space as, okay, you're taken away from the conflict, that's one element. But I was also thinking that very often there is a very strong unwillingness to go into traumatic experiences and memories. So when Roberta was talking about like the language and the environment and kind of the alienness that comes with that, I was just wondering whether that also might be, in a way, creating a safe space to engage with these things, because then there is a distance that, I don't know, I was just, it's an idea that popped into my head that I just thought I should throw it out so that you can say, no, that's, but yeah, so this other idea of what safe space could also be about in creating alienation in a way, or kind of a distance from that experience, because it's so different to be, like she was talking about, in Northern Ireland, and because it requires an incredible amount of bravery to engage with these, or courage in a way, to engage with these kind of processes, and maybe it's actually, I don't know, I was thinking it might actually be easier to do it when you're not just because it's all of a sudden become safe, but also because it's removed from
this distance. I think, Luis Carlos, also what you were referring to, right? So this, where you started, this in-betweenness, but also that you're actually not there all the time. You're in a different, yeah. I think there are lots of linkages, yeah.
Pablo, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think there's a matter of balance, and that has to do with this sensation of justness. What's the exact point where you can face the monster and where you can preserve yourself? It's a cliff. It's a very subtle space, but that for me is the space of difference between pain and suffering. I think that pain is something that we cannot avoid. Something that is lacking is creating pain. We are going to have to deal with pain all our lives because something is not there, and we deal with that as Gruyere cheeses. We have holes all over our bodies, so we need to deal with the hole. But instead, suffering is something that we can take the rid of. We can work with that in order to. We cannot change the story, but we can change the version. We can change the narrative we have from that thing. And by changing that, there's something that has nothing to do with pain, but transforming this suffering. And that's for me the slight difference between what a biography is and what a history is. Biography is an amount of episodes and things that happen to you, and you have nothing to do with that. But your story, your history, then you write there. Then you have some authority. Then you have some legitimacy in order to try to play with that in a way. And by doing that, bringing that gesture to a common space where another one can take the torch and keep going with that. Because that's why we do that, in order to let the others know what happened in a way, and because that's our common patrimony, I think, and that's our responsibility as artists in an ethical way, to be able to create spaces where you say no pasarán, and to be able also to create spaces and to provide, to inherit to the next ones in a way they can deal with that in a way that is desactivated of poison, that it keeps the story, that it keeps the creation and the lineage and everything you need to, but without the poison.
Luis Carlos, do you want
Yes.
to respond? Yes.
No, I think for me, yeah, when you talk about the safe space, is the first, I think, is my family, no, my family, but I was not in Colombia, so it's the memory of that family, and I think that the safe space is also is not a physical space. You have to create it, and that is what Pablo do in his workshops. And in my case, I was trying to do that with the photo book, and now I'm interested to do workshops with the experience I had making these photo books, and I thought it was more transformative to me than making exhibitions, for instance. And I think one of the reflections of humor that Pablo helped me during his workshop, trying to see my own story as something so baroque, Latino, full of music, full of radio, full of yes, paradox, because in Europe and the US they talk about all this diversity of the Amazonia and all this Garcia Marquez and all this surreal, but that for us is not surreal. It happens every day. This absurd reality between war and living, and it's every day, and it's not something from the past. Is happening today. Today, many stories, many still killing and victims, and I think I like a lot the definition of Sildo Meireles, referring to Roberta stitching. It's like each stitching or each gesture as an artist, it can be seen as something microscopic, but it really can create permanent changes in some people. And this is what matters. It can be seen something really insignificant, but it's a seed. And that's the space and the environment of creating workshops that Pablo do, and I was doing a long time ago, but can help us to go forward. And yes, I think in Prio we had that first encounter in Geneva, and it was so great, because we were 8 artists talking about all our different methodologies, but not something as scientist, but something in creative process. It's so I don't know, it's experimental. We make a lot of mistakes as well.
Yeah, I think Luis Carlos, you said this was a beautiful way to finish this conversation. I'm afraid that we have to finish this conversation since it's already 3:30. But for me, these are all these little seeds, as you say, that I think even through the Inspire project, all the seminar series have been adding these little seeds to something bigger that is growing, and I'm hoping that the audience that accompanies us in this process also sees that. So thank you so much to both of you, to Luis Carlos Tovar and to Pablo Gershanik, for sharing in such an intimate way your creative practice that has impact on so many people. And thank you to all the audience. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you, Roberta, from the Northern Ireland. I know where you are. And we've invited Roberta to a seminar, so I'm hoping that she will share with us also her work in probably February, so we can continue these encounters. Thank you, Eva, and Eva has something to say at the end, I think.
Thank you all for attending the seminar, and really hope that the conversation can continue away from the seminar as well. I just wanted to let you know about our upcoming seminar, 21st of November, which will be led by Lebanese visual artist and architect Jad El Houri, who will present his artistic practice, which also blends or deals with public and private connections, and who will also hold a workshop. It will be a hybrid seminar. So he will hold a workshop here in Oslo, investigating the role, like our role as an audience in relation to wars and conflict. So stay tuned for more information on that, and hope to see some of you in person there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Cassia.
Luis
Thank you,
Carlos,
everyone.
Pablo, do you want to stay for 1 second?
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.